once they told us. Have an honest look around, what do you see? All the dead slaves blinded.
Hi, welcome to the Great White North Report. I'm your host, Roman De Silvi. So a couple of days ago it came out that the Monk debates canceled the foreign policy event because Trudeau won't attend. The other three major party leaders had confirmed that they would attend. This came out on September 24th. The Monk debates are something that happens every so often. I know they had Steve Bannon on last year and it was a big protest. Organizers of a foreign policy election debate was scheduled for next Tuesday. They've canceled the event because Liberal leader Justin Trudeau won't participate. No one has had a bigger impact on Canada's foreign policy over the last 4 years than Trudeau. The Prime Minister's refusal to attend the debate denies Canadians the real opportunity they had in this election to see his foreign policy record and challenge it. So this is the second debate that Trudeau has skipped out on, and it's making him look like a real wussy. That he can't hold his own now that his own record is brought up to light. He was in the last federal election Monk debate back in 2015 with Harper. Harper didn't shirk from it, but Trudeau is skipping out this year on it. Now, his opponents are slamming him, saying he's running from his own disastrous foreign policy decisions. And it's perhaps the biggest hit to Canada's international reputation came last week when Justin Trudeau made headlines for wearing blackface. I've already spoken about that. That's not a big deal to me. That has nothing to do with policy. It just has to do with someone being younger and having a good time. So let's talk about Trudeau's foreign policy since he arrived. Now, at the time of Trudeau's arrival, relations with the United Nations and the United States weren't all that great. The trade prospects with China and India were bright, and the most important foreign policy priority was going along with the Barack Obama era. Now, some people are blaming the shift in power in Washington with Trump's victory. It knocked Trudeau's government's sunny ways, and Canada is back foreign policy squarely off its kilter. I kind of agree. Trudeau wanted to win a 2-year temporary seat in the Security Council at the UN. As far as that goes, it's no big deal to me if we win that or not. It appears like you have to campaign, you have to spend money just to get it done. Statistics tabled in Parliament last week showed Canada is behind the pace of campaign spending it set in the 90s when it last won a seat on the Security Council. You be kidding me, you gotta pay for that privilege? I'd rather waste my money somewhere else. So basically, our government has spent over $500,000 since 2016 on its campaign to land a Security Council seat, well behind the pace of $1.9 million Canada spent over 4 years to win its last 2-year term in 1999-2000. The foreign policy record is pretty underwhelming. Trudeau didn't do himself any favors with his Canada's back pronouncement. So basically, Trudeau talks the talk but can't walk the walk. The rhetoric was very high. Attitude and swaggering about saying Canada's back. Canada's back from what? Now, there is a comprehensive free trade deal with Europe up and running, and its other trade ambitions in Asia making inroads with economic giants China and India have stalled. So Trump's trip to India was a failure, not because of the much ridiculed photo ops of himself, but because Canada's trade interests with the country are going nowhere. And that's true. We should have closer ties with India as a former Commonwealth country, but we don't. Considering how many people from India come to Canada as immigrants, we should have closer ties. But then again, we should probably stop immigration from India to Canada. The same goes for China. It rebuffed Trudeau's so-called progressive trade agenda when he visited there. And it's even gotten worse ever since the CEO of Huawei got arrested. It's gone really bad. Ever since then, the Chinese have arrested and detained many Canadians and have shut off many of our exports to China. And we have done nothing to hit back. Renegotiating NAFTA has really taken a lot out of the government's foreign policy. And it took a lot of time out of Chrystia Freeland. Now, the biggest foreign policy problem right now for Canada is definitely with China and Beijing. The Communist Party is definitely belligerent and expansionist police state, and they're determined to displace the United States and refashion the entire world order to its own purposes, drawing dozens of developing countries into its militarized debt trap Belt and Road project. They also are dealing with a Hong Kong uprising, and the Canadian hostages Michael Korvik and Michael Spavor are still being held by Beijing. And Trudeau and his government have been afraid to choose a side. Pick a side in these things. Let's go at them. Let's hammer them. Now, when it comes to the other parties like the New Democrats, the NDP, and the Greens, they don't have anything to show for themselves by way of a fleshed out foreign policy platform. Andrew Scheer and his Conservatives have an articulated, careful, pragmatic approach. And The best one has been Global Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland, has managed to force on the Liberals' foreign policy establishment. She's done a really good job, I think, considering where she is, caught in a rock and a hard place. We have to disengage ourselves from China, and that will, all those China trade enthusiasts from a couple of decades ago that have been around, a generation of them actually, they've left us vulnerable to Beijing's bullying and influence peddling and subversion tactics. It's time to wean ourselves away from them. When Trudeau did visit Beijing, it was a fiasco because Chinese balked at Ottawa's demand that any free trade pact include requirements that China adopt Canadian progressive labor, environmental, and women's equality policies. Like Canada's going to tell China what to do. Why would anyone in Ottawa, in their right state of mind, imagine that the Communist Party would contemplate for one moment allowing a foreign government to write a script for Chinese social reform? Was either dreaming, on drugs, or incompetent, or all three. Now, I'm in favor that the collapse of the free trade talks with China was the best outcome for Canada, because any free trade agreement would make Canada only a greater victim of the CCP's economic imperialism that it already is. What we need is fewer non-tariff barriers for Canadian goods and services at their end, and more barriers and transparency on Chinese investment in ours. Trudeau's progressive diplomatic and trade policy is the problem with the liberal progressive foreign policy is that they always add human rights to it. Human rights and free trade and all that stuff. You can't go telling people what to do with what they buy from you. For example, earlier in 2018, the president of the Philippines canceled a deal to buy 16 helicopters from Canada after the Trudeau government ordered a review of the contract over human rights concerns. Duterte lashed out against restrictions on the use of military equipment against terrorists and rebels. I'm sure Trudeau is a bright boy, but the terrorists, ISIS, are contaminating the locals. And if I cannot use the gunships and the helicopters, then I might as well surrender this government to them. So that already soured our relationship with the Philippines, and it got even worse. Had our garbage crisis that almost brought us to the brink of war with the Philippines. Garbage that had been collecting for 6 years finally came home after Duterte threatened war and threatened to ship it back to Canada. Only then did Trudeau's government finally do something. Relations with Saudi Arabia have also hit a snag, as the Saudis don't appreciate having their private lives examined, poked and prodded by us, who then, because we berate them in public and counsel them how to be better, more moral members of society. We can't go into another country saying how much better we are. It has been a failure right from the start. The other thing I noticed about Trudeau is that he seems very disinterested in foreign policy, and he hands over most of his responsibility to Chrystia Freeland. She appears to be happy doing it. So there doesn't seem to be any consistency in Trudeau himself. So going back to the whole Trudeau skipping the next debate over foreign policy is probably a good idea for him. It makes him look like a coward, but in light of his own foreign policy failures, I don't think anything he's really done has been any good. If anything, he's pissed off more people than he's actually helped. His sunshine policy doesn't work, and we need to get our foreign policy initiatives back on track. We do need to wean ourselves away from China, look more closely into other places. As I mentioned before, I'd like to see free trade among the British Commonwealth as a counterbalance to NAFTA. We also need to re-strengthen our military and stop chasing after all these UN missions, peacekeeping missions. Let someone else do it for a while. We need to bring all our military back home, retrain, refit, and resupply with some good quality equipment. Anyway, that's all I have for now. Please leave comments in the comment section. Subscribe if you want. I just like doing this, and we'll continue doing this and bringing out more stuff as I see it. Till next time. Bye.
All the dead slaves blind us